Hey, what's up, guys? This is take two. As the title implies, this video is about the Medrunner org, which I was a member of until just recently. I will be providing an insider's perspective into the organization and give you the benefit of everything I've learned, which you will not find any other way since, as will be discussed at length, Medrunner goes out of its way to keep everyone in the dark about how they actually operate, as opposed to how they say they operate, including by intimidating their own members into silence. This will be a tell-all and get into the nitty-gritty of a few specific examples of the more despicable instances of Medrunner operation. And for each of these examples, I've brought the receipts. That said, I will endeavor to be as accurate, fair, and honest as possible, and I will point out what was and is good along with the bad. It is my aim to provide the viewer with the best and most current information that can be had so that any related decisions they face will be made with the best information possible. Before really getting into things, I would like to say a few words about why I'm cutting this vid. Mostly my motivation is that, as somewhat of a content creator, I'm always looking for something that interests me enough to turn into content. I've already cut some vids related to Star Citizen and more recently Medrunner, so this is more of the same, although with a new twist. Previously, Medrunner has given me mostly good things to say about them. However, recent events have opened my eyes to serious issues within the org, which I wish I knew before, and therefore are things my viewers stand to benefit from knowing. I will begin with that the vast majority of those in the org seem to be good people and decent players. This makes perfect sense, at least to me, being that I too was attracted to the idea of the org. I sincerely hope that the members of Medrunner who watch this understand both that my exposure of what is bad about Medrunner is not a reflection on them, and also that I think they deserve much better from the officers of any org they are part of. They seem mostly competent, with some noteworthy and comedic exceptions, and to legitimately enjoy the medical rescue and milsim gameplay. I enjoyed everyone's company, and I had a good time on the whole. The only not fun times were when some insufferable and pretentious officer spoke up to awkwardly and pointlessly criticize someone, which consistently seemed to always be done in a tactless way where I felt embarrassed for the guy being criticized. But so long as the members were left alone to do their thing, a good time was had by all. So what's good about the org? Let's start there. Quite a lot, actually, which makes the overall situation even more tragic, being that the org had such potential, if not squandered away by such poor officers. I have previously discussed some of this in another video, which I will be taking down due to it not having aged well in light of recent developments. First, the overall concept of what Medrunner is has massive potential. A well-organized org that centers around a professional medical rescue force that gets frequently called by players needing assistance is, quite simply, an engine for content and fills in a massive gap inherent to the game itself. There is a complete lack of content in Star Citizen. And how an org like this fills in that gap? It's how an org like this fills in that gap that really attracted me to Medrunner in the first place. However, as I have recently learned, Medrunner is not unique in its conceptual design, and there are other similar options, such as Med Reapers and other orgs I have yet to discover. Medrunner has a rather impressive website. It's apparent that a great deal of time has been put into their website and that it has been worked on by people with some significant expertise in what they are doing. This website also keeps track of mission statistics, such as success and activity rates, of the entire org and individual responders. Their Discord is also well designed and efficiently facilitates the coordination of rescue teams. It's also through this Discord that much of their internal communication is processed, including moderation activity. They have a presence across all the big social media platforms where they post their fairly nice self advertising propaganda videos. They even have training materials and even classes scheduled for new and old members alike to learn the procedures and regulations. These materials, along with everything else mentioned, gives the org a professional and even corporate feel, not unlike what many of you might have encountered in real life at some job you had before, which you may or may not see as a good thing. I myself started doing rescues with them before taking any classes, but everyone is required to at least pass several entry tests with a score of 100% on each. Accomplishing this does require some extensive reading, since the questions on these tests are arranged in such a way that guessing the answer is not really possible. And while this kind of studying and testing might seem as weirdly taking themselves too seriously, others like myself might actually appreciate it as serving to better prepare and make more confident the new responders. But that's about it for the good stuff, which essentially all boils down to their information and communication infrastructure. So, what's bad about Medrunner? It should be noted as I go through these things. As promised, I will be including the receipts, which you'll see in the video. If you really want to verify what I'm saying, just pause the screen at times and read through each thing. One of my first missions with them, my team was composed of a Redeemer and Cuddy Red, with the majority of the team being in the Redeemer. In total, about 7 on mission. 5 in the Redeemer and 2 in the Cuddy. Upon arriving on site, the Cuddy Red arrived right behind us, and for some reason, the pilot thought it was a good idea to full throttle forward. He ended up building up to quite a speed right before actually ramming directly into us, blowing up both ships and killing the entire response team in one swift move. Everyone in the channel just went silent. Eventually, I actually laughed out loud in the channel to break the tension. When this happened, any ideas I had about this org being an elite force rapidly evaporated, and I began to wonder about what I had gotten myself into. My concerns were short-lived, however, as I soon saw this occurrence was certainly an exception. But it did happen, and that's pretty funny. Medrunner is often called by clients that also happen to be Medrunner members themselves. In fact, this kind of client might make up the majority of Medrunner rescues, probably because Medrunner is relatively unknown despite all the advertisements and being probably the biggest Med rescue org. I mean, I myself can say I only found out about them 2 months ago, and I have been playing Star Citizen for years now. But in any case, I know I can personally say I have been a client maybe even more than I have been a responder. On one such occasion, I called for rescue from a bunker, and just before the Med Runner team got to me, I fully died. The AI kept shooting despite my being incapacitated. I respawned and returned and found the entire Medrunner team was all but completely wiped by the AI, with only a single survivor who actually retreated and abandoned his fallen mates. After that point, I, along with 1 or 2 Medrunners, struggled to gain control of the bunker from the repeatedly respawning AI, while a couple of other Medrunners lay on the ground, waiting for a revive that would actually never come. Eventually, although my body despawned, I was able to kit up with some of the loot in the bunker, and we made it out with the mission box. My Battle of 1000 Tears video playing now in the background shows this entire event, and I encourage you to look it up separately. If you watch the vid just mentioned, there is a timestamp to a Medrunner being in blatant violation of one of their most inflexible and sacrosanct rules, which is always to be wearing Medrunner uniform while on mission. You can clearly see this person is both not in uniform and wearing armor identical to my own when I initially died, which you can also visit the timestamp to see. Although I'm not 100%, I think it's likely he stole this armor from my body and then lied about it. You might note a color difference, but the outside weather can and does change armor color to the color of the dust blowing around. And he was indeed coming from the outdoors. While this point about the armor does not directly relate to competency, it does at the very least certainly relate to professionalism and possibly integrity. Now, you might be thinking it's rather embarrassing for a team of rescuers to get wiped and then themselves be in need of rescue. However, to be fair, shit happens even to the best sometimes. That said, the bunker mission itself was something I am able to complete solo, although with difficulty, especially now after some lessons learned. In fact, I'm now able to complete even the more difficult but similar mission where you gather 3 consignment boxes instead of just 1. Yet, the Medrunner team of at least 3 or more, despite having the ability to revive themselves, completely wiped, and were pushed out of the bunker by AI. They completely lost control of the situation and were not able to gain control until I respawned and returned to help, along with even more Medrunners arriving to lend a hand. Now, these are 2 examples of situations that relate to competence. However, I think it important to note that I have never thought to condemn Medrunner based on general incompetence. In fact, I view competence as a rather unimportant metric to evaluate them, at least in terms of the competence related to running missions efficiently and successfully. I was perfectly happy to enjoy the org in ways that did not really relate to how well they performed in mission. The competence of the players never really interfered with my enjoyment at all, even when the lack of it resulted in everyone instantly dying, which I found more funny than anything else. After all, it was really more about the content and experience rather than a display of competence that actually interested me. Yet, with all that said, just recently I encountered online content about Medrunner that draws attention to exactly this issue of Medrunner competency being a persistent problem for them, such as in the video put out by Karl Kaput that has over 10k views now. And upon seeing this, I consequently couldn't help but be reminded of the hilariously bad performances I've witnessed, like the ones I just mentioned, but certainly not the only ones. Issues of competency, however, are really the least of Medrunner's worries, as I only recently learned. They suffer from either severe incompetence within their officer ranks, especially those responsible for moderation, or even worse, a degree of corruption that is so severe that it stands to completely destroy the org's standing in the eyes of the larger community. Medrunner seems to be decomposing before our very eyes and is apparently insisting they become only known for squandered potential and abuse of admin power. All too often the downfall of entire communities that could have otherwise been something much better. My first encounter with corruption was in how a particular complaint of my own was handled. I had opened a complaint ticket in reaction to one of the Medrunner dispatchers, A dispatcher is a position for a more experienced member who behaved quite badly and in a way that indicated a dishonestly hidden bias or prejudice against the client, me. I issued the complaint and was eventually asked for clarification on a few details. Then I was told they would keep the ticket open while they work on this. I did not hear back from them for quite some time, about 2 full weeks. Some 2 weeks later, I happened to notice that the ticket was closed. Nothing was said to me, just closed ticket. I looked into it and I saw the command that closed the ticket, which contained a one-word reason: resolved. I found it rather odd, to say the least, that one of the two parties directly involved in the complaint, and in fact the one who actually made the complaint, was not involved in the resolution in any way whatsoever, nor even informed that there was a resolution, nor what the resolution supposedly was, nor any explanation for why it took so incredibly long to respond, nor anything about any conclusions reached, nor anything about any actions taken, nor anything done whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. I then messaged the person who closed the ticket directly and asked them why it was closed and to get more information. They responded and said that they don't disclose any moderation taken, and that I did try to reach out in the ticket and had no answer. I immediately knew he never reached out and was lying about that to avoid having to deal with the fact that I was given no response at all. What I didn't figure out until later is that this lie was actually far more revealing than I thought, which I will discuss a little later. When I confronted him on that point, he just played dumb, saying he must have forgot to reach out to me. And he reiterated that he wouldn't say what actions, if any, were taken. When he said this, I then knew no actions were taken at all, and it was all just swept under the rug, to be concealed behind some supposed rule of their own against informing of resolutions, which makes absolutely zero sense. It's not hard to imagine a host of other situations where moderation actions would quite obviously need to be discussed with the complainant, such as any where someone was made to feel uncomfortable around another person due to that other person's conduct. For example, consider something where sexual harassment or stalkerish behavior had occurred against a woman, and how moderators would have to necessarily inform the complainant about the actions they would take to protect her. Do you think they would then come back and tell this victim of sexual harassment nothing more than it's resolved and we don't talk about our actions? Of course not. And my own situation was similar insofar as I too did not feel comfortable being rescued by any team, nor being a responder in any team, where that same fool was involved. I simply no longer trusted any alert he was associated with, and it was my concern he would carry forward that same brain-dead way of operating in the future situations, which I did not want to have to ever suffer through again. So it's clear the moderator, or those he was scheming with, just made up such a nonsensical rule to avoid having to admit what was done and said. But why? The only thing that makes any sense is that they knew that what they did or didn't do, if word got out, would expose them for some kind of serious and shameful wrongdoing. Now, as I already mentioned, This moderator said he must have forgot to reach out to me, as he first said he tried to. It wasn't until much later that I realized why this mod chose those exact words and how this was actually proof that these mods were consciously lying. I initially just glossed over him saying he forgot to reach out to me. But since then, I have remembered that the mods did actually reach out to me and initially got no response because I did not notice their messages. However, the kicker is that when the mods tried to contact me previously, it was in regard to a totally different situation, namely their revenge complaint about my profile pic. So when this mod let it slip that he forgot to reach out to me, what he revealed is that what he really forgot was that we were talking about my complaint against one of them and not the completely separate revenge complaint they fabricated about me. He revealed by this mistake, and then his choice of words when trying to cover it up, that in his mind, there was really only one situation, not two. In other words, he was momentarily disoriented about how to keep the moderation team's lies straight, and in that chaos, revealed that both situations, my complaint about one of them and the revenge complaint about me, were essentially all reduced to a single situation in their minds. This is obviously a clear example of corruption and incompetence and abuse of admin powers. Imagine you're reported to the police that an off-duty police officer assaulted you and broke your nose for no reason. Then, after no response for several weeks, you are contacted by these same police telling you that you are being charged with hate speech for something innocent and completely unrelated you posted on social media. And when you ask them to also comment about the progress of your complaint about one of them, they simply say it has been resolved and then refuse to say anything more. Clearly, that resolution amounted to nothing more than them just ignoring your complaint and then deliberately trying to punish you for having made that complaint by targeting you with a revenge investigation where they hope to find something wrong about you instead of just dealing with your complaint against them in an honest, straightforward, transparent fashion. As bad as this sounds, this is exactly what Medrunner just did. And when this fool let it slip that he accidentally forgot what situation he was replying to, he just provided yet another indication of all that. What seems most likely to me, given what I know about their internal operations, some of which I've already explained, is that the person I complained about was just one of their officers, maybe even a member of the moderation team himself. And the others like him refused to hold one of their own accountable for his blatantly inappropriate behavior. So they decided to do nothing about him and then just started scheming about how to take revenge against me for the crime of trying to hold one of them accountable for their own wrongdoing. They just took my complaint against them and essentially just did their very best to somehow turn it into a complaint about me. They didn't even bother to make up some story about how the complaint about them was handled and instead just said nothing and then shadow closed the ticket, hoping I had already forgotten about the whole thing. Not that they really cared if I did or not, since they knew they held all the cards and could just lie if they wanted to, like saying something as obviously nonsensical as they never discuss moderation actions. Perhaps I should also mention what this person I complained about actually did to get me to issue a complaint ticket against him in the first place. I think that appropriate given it's rather telling of the kind of thing that goes on within the org and the kind of behavior that can be expected from them, so why not? As a client, I initiated an alert, a call for help, after becoming injured in a bunker mission. Plus, I knew I'd want extraction due to the dangers of flying while injured. It was one of those endless wave missions, so I was fighting hard to survive. During a brief moment of relative safety, I was able to alt tab and contact Medrunner. I then continued fighting and waited for a party invite in game, which is nearly always the next step. None came after quite some time, and eventually I was able to quickly alt tab during a lull in the fighting again. I then see this dispatcher asking me the strangest questions I had ever seen asked of a client. This came as quite a surprise, being that I had contacted Medrunner in the identical way dozens of times before, but never encountered such strange questioning. I was able to quickly read and then type a reply of about 4 words, which more than adequately answered his questions and indicated my dire situation of being pinned and fighting for my life. It should also be noted that most of his questions didn't even need to be asked, since I had already provided the information he was asking about in the initial request for help. Hence, part of the reason why his questioning was so very strange. It was as if he didn't even read my help request like he was supposed to. I then got back to defending myself versus AI. Some more time passed and still no party invite came. I stole another moment to alt tab, and this fool was still asking me the same insanely stupid question, which was actually a trick question designed to trap me into saying something that wasn't true. Weirdly, he kept repeating the question exactly as he first wrote it, even though I had already addressed it the first time. Even more disturbing, he threatened to close the request if I did not answer this trick question, which, again, he already knew the answers to and I had already answered anyway. I was able to quickly type fighting, although I misspelled it in my haste, before I had to alt tab right back to fight off AI that were pushing me. I was kept busy fighting AI from that moment on and for another 20 or 30 minutes straight. It was actually an epic battle, and the bodies were piling high. I had to keep myself heavily drugged with dex and rocks so my tier 1 arm and chest injuries wouldn't completely prevent me from fighting back. My drug levels were getting dangerously high after having to repeatedly inject, and these drug levels alone bordered on crippling me. I don't know how, but I eventually got out from being pinned and then out from the bunker with all 3 boxes, and completed the 55k consignment mission solo. No invite from Medrunner ever came, and I was completely left for dead by the medical or rescue organization, despite even being one of them myself. As I was flying away, I tabbed out to check what was up with Medrunner and I see this moron had closed the request and lied, saying I did not respond to him, even though I clearly did twice. He also added, revealing his specific malfunction. In his words, I've got reason to believe you need combat assistance and not medical assistance. His malfunction finally revealed here was that he was just so worried I was trying to get combat assistance despite my having already indicated I was already injured and needed extraction. This also was a lie, because he literally had no real reason to worry about any of that, at least not from my request for help alone. All he had was pure half-baked suspicion, and that's it. More precisely, all he had was pure prejudice and bias for God knows what fucked up reason. Yet saw fit to treat a client and a fellow Medrunner with the most bizarre kind of suspicion and disrespect I would have previously thought unimaginable for any dispatcher or Medrunner to ever treat a client with. And I'm sure he was therefore in violation of a number of Medrunner's own policies and guidelines, but apparently those standards are just for show, as will be discussed further. This would certainly not be the last time I saw such arbitrary disregard for Medrunner's own policies by their own highest ranking members. The next instance of corruption came conspicuously very quickly after the complaint I just mentioned was resolved in the shadows. I was contacted and immediately threatened that I would be banned from the Discord and removed from the org if I did not change my profile pic, which, by the way, is of an American flag, an American eagle, and our current American president. They tried to dishonestly conceal the threat by using weak language like might not align and please consider changing. But what they were actually saying was never in doubt. Change it or else was the message. They would later double down on this lie and repeat that they just wanted to discuss, but as I will show, the message was always clearly coercive and an ultimatum. The conclusion was foregone, and contrary to their lies, no discussion would make any difference, which is exactly how it all played out, proving me right. They cited Rule 2, which states, keep politics out of the community, and we're here to have fun and cooperate with members of all backgrounds and nationalities. Apparently not American nationalities, though. And I replied, pointing this out, and how my pick isn't about politics, it's about national pride and an expression of my identity as an American. I also pointed out how them describing my pick as anything but that is just them inserting their own subjective twists on things. Even worse, their own attempt to insert politics into the community by aggressing against those they perceive don't support the same political party as they do, namely by censoring them and dishonestly masquerading such partisan censorship as maintaining standards. Should be noted, and I want you to keep in mind, I had never discussed anything political with anyone in the Discord, nor spoken to anyone about their anything other than Star Citizen and rescues, and they knew that. They had gone beyond moderating behavior in this case, and started looking for something, anything, to use against me for God knows what reason. When there was nothing I had done they could attack, they then attacked me for who I am, namely my nationality and my proud display of that, and then dishonestly tried to twist it into being about something else. The timing of all this was very revealing as well. This focus on my profile pic came after nearly 2 months of being a regular member in the community. You would think that such a very problematic promotion of a political party, as they said, would have been noticed far earlier. Yet nearly 2 full months went by without even a comment by anyone. Then, suddenly, something gets said about it, interestingly only after I had reported the wrongdoing of one of their officers. I was contacted about the pic July 9, and the complaint I issued was closed July 13. This makes it obvious that the decisions to close my complaint about their officer and then begin attacking me for my profile pic were made around the same time. It seems this was the real resolution they arrived at but didn't want to tell me about. They decided to cover up for their fellow officer and let his wrongdoing go completely unchecked, and, likely at his direction, looked for some petty way to punish me for complaining about him, hence the idiotic focus on my perfectly fine profile pic. I have never seen nor heard of a more blatant and dishonest abuse of admin roles and or hilarious incompetence in the officer ranks of a community. Anyone involved in any of these situations should never have been allowed to occupy any position with any kind of power whatsoever, and if that wasn't brutally apparent before then, it certainly is now. I informed these fools that if they move forward with this farce, then I would be exposing their misconduct and discrimination based on my nationality. They accused me of threatening them, and of course, it was apparently completely lost on these dishonest, power tripping idiots how stupid it is to make that kind of accusation when they were already the ones resorting to threats and abusing power from the very beginning. In any case, I made it clear I was not threatening them, but rather letting them know they don't have the monopoly of power that they think they might have. Since I'm fully capable of holding them accountable for their own wrongdoing, as is anyone else that consequently gets exposed to Medrunner's practices and then correctly judges them to be repulsive and despicable. Speaking of Medrunner's reputation, I had no idea until all this happened that Medrunner actually already does have a fairly bad reputation in the larger SC community. There has already been negative content and posts exposing them for one thing or another, including those posted by Medrunner members themselves. I only noticed their bad reputation after this most recent instance of admin abuse I was targeted with. I wondered if anyone else had similar complaints about them or if I was unique, so I simply Googled Medrunner and found quite a lot actually, including a video with over 10k views throwing shade. Additionally, also very recently, while in the voice chat of the Medrunner Discord, I overheard one of the other members, the team lead actually, talking about the misconduct of another officer. He went on to say how a particular officer, that machine is the name of the officer, had come into the channel a little earlier demanding that he relinquish lead so that the officer could then assume lead. There was no reason for this demand. This officer just wanted to be the lead for the sake of being the lead. If that seems fucked up that an officer would come in demanding that something like that, that's because it is, even according to Medrunner's own standards. Officers are not empowered to just assume lead on a whim and take that role away from whoever is currently holding that position. Apparently, that officer made a big stink about it in the channel and then left dejected, saying he would form his own team, which not a single person ended up even joining. Apparently, he then hung out in that channel, soaking for hours all by himself. Now, this team lead said he did initiate a moderation ticket as a result. However, I'm just assuming, based on the experiences of mine I've already mentioned, this guy is about to get royally fucked by these corrupt admins, who predictably will side with their own officer, cover up his wrongdoing, and then fabricate some kind of revenge way of getting at the guy that complained about him. I should add that Medrunner has a very bad reputation and is apparently at war with Griefernet, which is supposedly an org of hackers and the lowest of the low in the online world. A lot of the posts I found online relate to this war. These people have been targeting Medrunner with various kinds of attacks, including hacking their Discord and by impersonating them. I have no idea how much about this war is true, however, what I am wondering at this point is what did Medrunner do to trigger GrieferNet as they apparently have? The only thing that makes sense to me is that Medrunner seems to be so heedless of making enemies that it becomes the same as if they were purposefully trying to piss people off. Just like the way they turned on me and needlessly now have another enemy. They could have continued to benefit from having a competent, valuable member, but they chose instead to target me with admin abuse, refused to course correct when I pointed it out, and now there is yet another person with mostly negative things to say and show about them. All that said, I would actually like to see Medrunner turn things around and thrive. Cut out some of the cancerous types to blame for the kinds of things I was exposed to, or otherwise bring them to heel. I would like to see Medrunner fix the serious issues that are plaguing them at the top instead of just doing damage control and trying to find new and better ways to cover those things up. Maybe if the owner steps in to make those kinds of changes, there might be hope. On the other hand, maybe he's more to blame for everything than anyone else. But as is, with the rate they are needlessly making enemies and embarrassing themselves in the process, all the hard work they've put into iterating a good org concept will just be sadly wasted as they just fade away. Just another community decomposing due to corruption and admin abuse, like so many others.